What's up guys? So this is going to be a short video going over the technical aspects of my game, how I'm structuring my scripts, my whole project package, and just what I've kind of learnt over my time with Unity and how I've envisioned the structure of the game. I mentioned in my first devlog that I was going to go over the technical stuff in a separate video, so that's going to be this video. So let's jump right into it. So this video is going to be a little bit more freeform, and I'm just going to go through the project and highlight the structure and just how the scripts are set up. Okay, so for anyone that's not super interested in the technical side of things, that's fine. We're going to be doing another devlog soon where I'm going to go over what I've been working on and how all of this plays into the actual game. But if anyone's interested in how I've structured my Unity project and what goes into that from the perspective of someone who's just come in and started learning it, then yeah, stick around and we'll go over it. So the first thing that I kind of focused on when I started building my Unity application was, well, obviously the first thing was just learning how what was required of a project. So the structure that you can kind of see here in front of you, this is my base root project package. So there's only a few ones here that I actually want to go over. I don't want to go over some of these things like the addressable assets and things like that. That can be done in a separate video if I ever do a addressable tutorial. But you can kind of get the idea of how I'm structuring my application. Hopefully it's zoomed in enough. I'm not sure if I can zoom in more, but yeah, so you can see here we have our animations. So this is where I keep all of my animation controllers, and my the animations that I construct are going to go into this one here. Then I have an art, kind of like where I put all of my art assets like materials, shader graph, so like my shader resources and things like that go into the art package. So that's like the root package is kind of like for the things that I'm working on, right? So the stuff that I build. So if I build a shader graph, that's going in there. Now obviously I'm utilizing a lot of assets and a lot of external projects, so you'll see where I account for that there. So then I have my this is another thing in regards to the addressable, so we don't need to go over that. I have the device display settings. So the device display settings, this is kind of this here I'm not actually using yet, but as far as I understand, these are using some form of a scriptable object to set up a device display configuration, and so you can get different displays. In this case, I think I got this from the input system tutorial where when you were on the keyboard, the device display settings were different. So when you pulled up the menu, it looked different for the PlayStation and the Xbox. So this was just a way of kind of figuring out how all of that worked. Then we have our editor package. So in Unity, you have the capability to actually create scripts that will interface with the editor itself. So you're almost creating a plugin within Unity from your own Unity project, which is kind of cool. It's really cool actually. You can see here I have one here, which is just a very simple script that was used. This was a part of a tutorial for the addressables for our assets, asset bundles for our streaming assets. So what this will do is it will create a little menu. If I come back to Unity here, you'll see that we have like a menu item here which says assets/build asset bundles. So if we come back here, you should be able to see under tools, I believe, no, here it's under assets here, yeah, because there's already an assets one, and you come down here, you'll see build asset bundles. So that script there is actually created inside of Unity itself, the actual editor. It's created this option here, and I can click that and it'll go away and it'll build it. And hopefully I don't break anything, because yeah, anyway, it's fine. So yeah, that's where all my editor scripts are going to be going. Then we have our environment sub package. So this is going to be when I'm working on the terrain and the actual terrain editor. I can actually start putting the environment specific things inside of here. And then this is the big one here, which is external. So like I mentioned, I use a lot of external plugins and things like that. So what I've done is I've created for things like art and shaders and audio, kind of like the texture-based resource packages, the things that are going to be going into the art side of things. I've created a subdirectory called external, and so this is where all of my external stuff comes from, and where I store it. And So this kind of creates like a sub package. So inside of here, for example, the advanced people pack, you can kind of see it has its own kind of project structure that we utilize. And then you'll see here it says editor. So inside of the scripts, we actually have editor scripts in here. So you can see the editor right here. So this will manipulate the editor and it will give me some kind of interface that I can use with this package. So yeah, that's where I keep all of that. And external, I have a fonts directory where I put my fonts, input. So this is the Unity input system. So when we're creating our character schemas, I can actually come back and show you. So we've got the player controls here. If we double click this, you'll see a little interface here for our input system. And I've created 2 action maps, one for gameplay and one for UI. And all you have to do is create bindings, or they're called actions, which are basically just bindings. And these actions can be triggered within any kind of script that you have. So it's a way of tying an action to a specific binding. So if we look inside of, what's a good example here actually? So jump's a good example. So for jumping, we have spacebar, the space keyboard. That's a keyboard one. So if we're on the keyboard, that's when we hit space, we'll invoke this event, which is a jump. But if we're on the gamepad here, you can see it's the button south on any gamepad. So this is universal for any kind of gamepad. So it'll be the south button. It will invoke a jump. So it's a really easy way. It's actually a fantastic system. It's an easy way to kind of bind different keys for different devices. It's fantastic. So far it's been really awesome. So yeah, so that's that. So that's where I put all those. Then we have a materials. This is actually legacy. This needs to be moved inside of art. So I'll probably move that soon, so you don't have to worry about that. Then we have our physics materials. So there are different types of materials, and physics materials, I figured I'd create a new directory for it. I'm not sure if I'll put this anywhere else later on. Like I said, I'm still learning a lot of this stuff, and yeah. So a lot of stuff will move. So next we have our plugins. So this is a little bit different. So we have our external, and then we also have our plugins. Now these kind of are pretty similar, right? They kind of have the same concept where we're using an external project or product, but the plugins is more catered to specifically things that are script based. So it's not necessarily art assets and things like that. It's more like performance tool sets or libraries that I'm using inside of my scripts. For example, we have the Animancer plugin here, and the Animancer plugin basically will gives me the ability to run animations in a more effective way than the typical animation components that Unity provides us. So this is what made my state machine actually possible, and it works really well. I highly recommend Animancer. It's a great product, and it's not super expensive. I think it's $60, which, I mean, it's kind of expensive for the Pro Edition. They do have a free edition, which you can check out. I'll leave a link in the description for that. I'm not going to go over each one of these, but you can kind of get the idea. We got the debugging essentials, we got the easy performant outline, easy collider editor, flat kit, monkey, stuff like that. So moving on, we have our prefabs. So prefabs are life. In Unity, prefabs are everything. So if you're getting used to using Unity, you're going to very quickly become a fan of prefabs. Now, the basic overview of what a prefab is, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because there's a lot of resources out there explaining what a prefab is, but essentially a prefab is like a preset of properties and scripts and components that you attach to one specific object. So inside of Unity, you have game objects, right, that you can put into your scene. And you'll notice that these aren't blue. These ones are blue, but these ones aren't blue. Now the difference there is that these are prefabs, and these are just game objects that I've right-clicked and did create empty, and that's created a game object, right? Now this can become a prefab that we can then use to drag into our game. So what I can do here is, let's say I call this prefab A. And prefab A has a bunch of script components. You know, we have a collider, a box collider. We have maybe whatever script this is. Okay, so we have that, and we want to basically say, okay, well, I want to be able to use this in other places. I could either copy paste this and now I've got another script here with the exact same thing. But then now I want to remove this on the script. I say, oh, hang on, we don't actually need the script, we need a different script. So I remove that. This one here hasn't removed it. So I guess the example would be then, if we delete that, we can drag this in. All you have to do is drag it in. Let's just drag it into our materials, because I'm getting rid of that anyway. As you'll notice that it changed to a blue color here. So what that said is that now this is a prefab. So now if I come into here, I can click and drag this into our scene, and it's created another one with a blue icon here saying it's a prefab. So now let's say I want to remove the script like I was doing before. We can jump into our prefab object. So this is the prefab inspection, and we can remove the script. We've removed it. We come back to our scene, and you'll notice the script is gone on both of them. So if you have a lot of game objects in the scene, this is going to be a lifesaver for you, and it's a necessity for this kind of development. And I'll get into a little bit about how I'm actually utilizing these prefabs. All right, let's move on, because it's getting I'm dragging it on a little bit. So the prefabs are great. I have my scenes, so we have all of the scenes in the game in a separate directory. I have my scriptable objects. Scriptable objects are fantastic. I'm going to do a separate video on scriptable objects, but I can give you a slight overview of this. So we have our abilities, our behaviors. Scriptable objects are like, think of it like data. It's like a way of providing data in a way that Unity knows how to interpret inside of its editor. So we can go, for example, in the editor, I can go into my attack ability. So this is the abilities project folder, and then the attack. And you'll see here we have a whole bunch of data definitions that I've set up to interpret this ability. So now we can utilize this scriptable object anywhere inside of our game. We can drag it into the editor and we can reuse it. It has inheritance support, so I can inherit the ability data, and I can create an attack ability data, like what I'm doing here. A charge attack ability. The charge attack ability is just an attack ability data structure. And you'll see here, if I go edit script, you'll see it's actually just inheriting the ability data. So we have inheritance support. Oh, and we also create a menu. So when we want to create new scriptable objects, we can do it through the editor. We can go up to create, dagger. So this is my own little sub menu. And we have data, conditions, events, event bus. And so what we're after is the data.
Power on.
And we can see here we can create items, we can create effects, we can create animations, we can create abilities. And the ability here is what we want. We can either create a charge attack, which is the one I just showed you, which is a sub variation of the ability data, or we can create a generic, which is just the base scriptable object of the ability data. And so I call it generic, and I might highlight that as well. But anyway, so we go like that. And now we've created, oh, where did I create it? I don't even know where I created it. Well, I created it somewhere. But anyway, let me just revert that. Oh, it's in here. Okay, so let me just do that again. So create, dagger, data, ability, and let's just create a generic. There it is right here. And now we have our new ability. And I can configure up my new ability with whatever conditions I have, whatever requirements are needed. And the idea is that I just slowly build up this data object so that we can utilize it in many more different ways, right? So okay, moving on. So now we have the scriptable objects. Cancel. And then we have our scripts. So this is obviously a very important one. We have our scripts, which is I've just created a subdirectory here called dagger, and then inside of it has all of my scripts and the structure for my application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to since I don't think there's anything else. I have texture, which needs to be moved, and volumes, yeah. So there's nothing really else to go over other than the scripts. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go over quickly how my scripts are set up, and kind of just go over my reasoning for how I've set up my scripts. So like I was saying in the devlog, when I create a new application or a game, I like to sit down and just really think about the structure of how I'm going to put everything together. And now I'm a very object-oriented programmer. I come from Java, and so a lot of what I do is very centered around object orientation with components in mind. So I really like component-driven applications also. But I think there's a real value in object-oriented programming at the core, that utilizes, you can utilize component-based programming with object-oriented programming. So for those of you who don't know what object-oriented programming is, I'd encourage you to go out and just kind of research that a little bit and really get familiar with what that term means. Because a lot of people coming into game design, they don't have a very good grasp on what object-oriented programming is, and it's oftentimes their code base will suffer because of it, in my opinion. The programs just don't scale as well, and it just becomes a real mess to deal with once you've grown your application. So I like to do that up front. I like to keep it as object-oriented as I can, and then I mix in the whole component-based, the component-driven aspect of it with the object orientation. So you can see here I have this structure here. So we have abilities, animation, behaviors, camera, core, creatures, editor. Like I was saying, editor, I can put editor scripts in there. Effects, items, model, skills, UI. So you can kind of see here I've got a very basic overview of what my game currently already has. We have abilities, we have animations, we have behaviors, we have camera, we have core, we have creatures, and so forth. So the main thing I want to focus on here is actually the creature. So when you're designing any kind of game or any kind of application, it's important to kind of get a feel for what the foundation and the base definition of what it is that you're creating, get that base foundation down. And in my case, because I'm building up the character first, I'm doing a lot of the character design initially, using the concept of a creature, or you could call it something else. It doesn't need to be creature. I call it creature because it encompasses a broad variety of different subsets of a creature, right? So you could have a monster which inherits a creature. You could have an alien which is a subset of a creature. You can have a human which is a subset of a creature, which is what I've done, and I'll go into that a little bit. But you get the idea, right? It kind of encapsulates everything, and you can then make sure all of the common creature-specific code is kept inside of this base class, which you can then reuse for other creatures going forward. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually developing a human character, that can very easily be extended out into all of these different types of creatures, like my NPCs. I can create my monsters, I can create, all these different types, even robots and idle things could be a creature that has maybe a limited functionality of a creature. You can override the functionality, but then still make use and leverage all of the creature specific things like the respawn state, the idle state, locomotion state, airborne, item change, die, whatever, all of these different states. So that's kind of the way I've designed it here initially. So you can see here I have a creature script. This is the core foundation of my character as of right now. So everything that is specific to a creature will be done here. And then you'll see here I have a subdirectory called human. And inside of here we have a human script. So if I go into this, you'll see it's a very basic thing that all it's doing is overriding this property to say we are race.human. So each creature has a race, and as we go, we're going to add more races to this. And it's just an enum. So all I'm doing is saying I'm a human race. But everything else is coming from the creature, so we're a creature here. We're extending it. Now, you'll see if I come back to my prefab here, we have a player prefab. So let's go into my prefab. I can delete these as well. Let's go into our player prefab. You can see here we have in here a creature, which is grayed out, and then we have a human. So what I've done is I've created a prefab that will represent all of the scripts and components that are required for our creature. So if we come into the creature, you'll see here I have the follow object. We have just all of these components and scripts that are used to define the states, the events, the health, damage, defense. So all of the things that I slowly am building up into my creature. And if we come back here to our human, you'll notice it has also got all of these things that the creature has, but instead of using the creature script, what I do is I remove the creature script. If we come into here, you'll see that the creature script has been removed, and I replace it with my human script, which effectively is a creature script, but it's a variation of the creature script. So we don't want the base one, so I remove it, we add the base one, with the human one, and I just fill it up with what it needs, right? So yeah, and then also inside of here you'll see I've got the model, so the male, the human male, and we can switch out this model for whatever we want, and all of the human specific things will remain the same as long as we plug it in properly. So yeah, that's a little bit of an overview there of how the player is structured. The reason I didn't just create a human here and then make this the player is because I want to be able to put things inside of a player object here, like for example the movement. All of the input system specific things are specific to a player, they're not specific to a human, right? So you can have human NPCs that don't have a player input, so having an object that is specific to the input of the game is actually really important. And all this will do is manipulate this object here, or this game object here, a prefab I should say, which effectively is a game object. Yeah, so you can see here we've got our inventory and all of that stuff, all of the good stuff that's meant to be on the player. So you can see here an example of using the same concept for a creature in the dummy. So if I click on the dummy here, we navigate to the dummy in our scene. You can see here this is our dummy, and now all of this is just an NPC effectively. We don't have any player input. It doesn't have a brain. If we come here, it's got a dummy brain, so I can configure up how it operates here with our brain script. But it doesn't do anything. It's just sitting there right now. I'm using it to test out collisions and things like that. And all of inside of the human, you'll see all of these states that need to be plugged in. So all of the states have been plugged in based off of all of these states that I've got here. And so that gives the creature the ability to die, to be airborne, to have locomotion, to be idle, to have respawn, things like that. So you can kind of see how that works a little bit. And then we have our events as well. So that's all using the prefab. So if I go into this dummy, you'll see it's the same prefab here as the creature, but it's a human prefab. So if I go to the overrides, you'll see here it's creature, so it overrides to creature, and it's just a human. So yeah, that's kind of how that works. There's a lot to go over here, and I don't want to ramble too much. The video is already 21 minutes long, so maybe I could just start wrapping things up here a little bit. Yeah, so the creature brain is kind of how it is explained as the creature. It's the brain of the whole creature. We have things like our animation controller, so the brain knows about what kind of animations it's allowed to use. It knows what ability state is currently active inside of the brain. It knows the cooldowns, so it keeps track of the ability cooldowns. We have all of our kind of common properties like our last delta position, our last root motion, our movement, our jump, what kind of jump state we're in, our dodge. So it's kind of the memory and also the decider of a creature. So I'm kind of mixing the two things. Like it will decide some things, it will keep memory of some things. Yeah, so you can see here we have a dodge action, stuff like that. Some of the stuff probably doesn't belong inside of the brain, like this stuff here will probably be moved out soon, but for now it's just staying in there, it's not an issue. And then obviously the brain knows what creature it's associated with, obviously. So yeah, so then all you have to do is you plug in your brain, and now all of a sudden these kinds of fields that are specific to whatever type of creature you're creating. Maybe I'm creating an automated NPC. The animations might be different, the ability cooldown might not exist, or maybe it's a little bit more flexible on the cooldowns. All of those kinds of things. So yeah, that's the brain. The inventory system is very complicated. I'll make a separate video for my inventory and item system, but you can see the structure here for the items. We have our actions, our conditions, for things like, I think it's right now the item conditions are only specific to, well, right now I think we're only using them for weapons, right? Yeah, so a weapon condition is an item condition, I think. Oh no, it's a creature condition. So I'm not actually using the item condition yet, but yeah, so you can see here we run these conditions. These conditions are kind of like just a block of code that will run, and it will return back a true or false to see if whether or not that condition passes. And I utilize those in my scriptable objects back here. If you look in our abilities, you'll see we have some conditions here. So the can start condition set creates like this definition, and then we have a bunch of conditions here that will run based off of whatever operator gate we give it. So in this case, an AND gate. We can make an OR gate, and then it'll run an OR check on each one of these conditions. But by default, we want to run AND. So in this case, it's just saying, can we start? And then it will run through this first condition here, and it will say, do we have any weapon? If we do, then we can start. If not, then it will not allow this attack ability to begin. Same with can end and can interrupt. In this case, it can end if the animation is complete, and in this case, it can interrupt if the state is matching. So if we have a matching state, we can initiate an interrupt. Now the interrupt won't straight away interrupt, it will jump down to the interrupter. So the interrupter gets called. So if this returns true, then it'll jump down to our interrupter. It'll check to see if we can interrupt, so it'll check to see if we can do this. If this is true, then we'll run. If this is false, then it doesn't care about this. It'll ignore this and it will just try and run an interrupt phase. But by default, we kind of want to make sure it's like that. And then the only condition for interrupting right now that the interrupter cares about is by animation. So this is kind of a limiting double check. So even though we've got a matched state, in this case, I want to make sure that the animation is at least 80% complete before this is allowed to actually cancel us. So I could uncheck this. Let's make that 8.8 again. But I could actually uncheck this right here and disable it, and you'll notice it disappeared because it's a conditional UI item, so it hides it. It's quite nice. It means you don't get too much gruff. You can kind of tie things together. Same with this. But anyway, I digress. So now that that's disabled, we can cancel this state at any point. We can just say cancel. We can just interrupt it, and it can be interrupted by the same kind of state, even though the animation hasn't even nearly completed. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of a brief overview of the current structure. There's way more I could go over in this video. It'll be super long. I don't want to make the video too long. You know, I don't want like an hour-long video, but it could easily go that long. But I hope this kind of gave you a bit of an idea of what the structure of the application looks like and how I've kind of put together the scripts and utilizing the scripts. My brain is just firing away at like what kind of stuff I could talk about, but I think I'll make another video for that, and hopefully until then this has been an informative video. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I am able to look at them. And yeah, hope you all have an awesome day, and until next time, take care.